Welcome to Not the Top 20. Welcome to the EFL, where the Championship weekender began with a match-winning my-ender. Wednesday defenders surrendering, a slender win for promotion contenders Sunderland. Sakamoto was Coventry's Tatsuhiro at Oxford. Blades avoided Queen's Park Ranger danger to cut Leeds' lead to 3. Preston press on in the Cup, a case of burn after losing for Burnley. In League One, Charlton are a dog with a Jones, barking mad in East London after scoring late corners at Orient. Wigan are shorn of Maloney after a Reading shredding. Stockport go to Iceland for Brecky, and Cambridge creep above Crawley. League Two saw leaders Walsall Wellsaw, throttled by Cottrell of Swindon. Bradford are just 4 points back. Michael Mellon prosciuting them into second place. For Carlisle, Mark Hughes is at the wheel. Barrow beaten, MK2 flimsy, Lindsay sacked, all that and more. You know what it is. An EFL recap on Not the Top 20's Monday pod. Winner of FSA Fan Media of the Year 2024, lest we forget George Elek. How are you doing?
I mean, that is incredible. Melon prosciuting. Amazing. Well, fair play.
I just desperately didn't want to go down the twisting my melon route. So we thought about it. We thought about it long and hard. We thought about what we like about melon. And the word prosciutto just popped in there.
I always think of it as being melon and parma ham, but that's just me. Still works. Same thing.
I'm a big Italophile, so for me it's important to specify. George Elek in the Championship, which is where we'll start. Reduced slate on account of some FA Cup games, which we will touch on at the end of this section. But at the top of it, significant results. Leeds not winning is one of those. They drew 1-1 at home to West Brom. It's been an incredible couple of weeks for Leeds United. We haven't been able to talk about much of it as they beat Sunderland on a Monday night and then Sheffield United on a Monday night. And maybe it was a little bit after the Lord Mayor's show, dropping points at home to West Brom. But I think that would be doing West Brom a bit of a disservice because after Firpo had given Leeds the lead, his second goal in consecutive games, what a fun player profile Firpo is, in that he's a fullback that becomes a number 9 attacking crosses in the box. The goal that he scored was notable not because it was a header from a fullback from open play, which he's making feel quite regular. I just love the fact it comes from a cross on his side of the pitch as well. It's not like it's a cross from the right and he's drifted in unmarked. It's on the left side already.
But also, and it's Dan James who puts the cross in, so it kind of feels like you're watching the whole goal in a mirror. I don't really understand. I don't understand what had to happen in the lead up to the goal, because I wasn't watching live, for Dan James to end up on the board on the left-hand side and Junior Firpo to be just kind of standing in the middle of the box. But either way, it was a means for Leeds to take the lead. And it's interesting how often this seems to happen where, we had a result on Monday night which saw Leeds come from behind for the second time in a week and beat a team who are vying for automatic promotion for the second time in a week. And it definitely felt after that like the league was kind of wrapped up. I was on the Square Ball podcast of the week and I said, you basically won the league. I wouldn't worry about it. And then in the very next game, things happen where you're looking at the league table again and it kind of reverses that form. It kind of reverses whatever happened. It undoes whatever Leeds did on Monday night to an extent, albeit, it's not a 3-point reversal because they did pick up a point. And that's kind of the crux of it. I think at 5 o'clock on Saturday, after the Sheffield United result came apparent, when that game was finished, you're like, it's back on again. And then you look at the league table again and you still see there's still a 3-point gap and you still see that Leeds have a far better goal difference than Sheffield United. And you still consider that this was one of Leeds' less dominant or least dominant performances at home we've seen all season up against a decent West Brom side. And they still drew the game 1-1 and they still restricted West Brom to very, very, very little compared to Sheffield United, who, for not the first time, were deservedly led 2-0, but lived on the edge a little bit, and probably in terms of the balance of play and balance of chances, did feel not fortunate, but on another day they easily could have not picked up 3 points. I don't think too much has changed in my mind in terms of the title race, albeit the fact is that it's not done, but I still think it probably will be done relatively soon.
Well, there's an argument that the losers of the weekend at the top of the Championship were Burnley, in that they didn't play, lost their FA Cup game, conceded football goals for the first time in months and months and months, albeit with a heavily rotated team and without James Trafford in nets, most importantly. But Sheffield United picking up a big away win at QPR is obviously damaging for Burnley. Even if Leeds' dropping points was a benefit for them, I suspect they're not that worried about Leeds right now. They're focused on Sheffield United. But just to go back to West Brom, as you say, a couple of things happened in this game that we haven't really seen happen at Ellen Road for a while. Before the Firpo goal, West Brom had started quite brightly and had one really nice transition attack that ended with Swift shooting just wide. After the Firpo goal, they played through Leeds' press much better than most teams have done recently and created a nice chance for Adam Armstrong. And then they scored an equaliser, a set-piece goal delivery from Swift headed in by Furlong. So they did really well to cause Leeds a headache defensively in a way that most teams haven't. According to FB Ref, only Luton and Oxford United have generated more XG at Ellen Road this season in a league game, although it's probably worth pointing out the results of those games were 3-0 and 4-0 to Leeds, which likely had some impact on that. Bartley had another header in the second half, which went close. Joseph hit the bar for Leeds. Would have been a really nice take, that. And James went close as well. But a 1-1 draw, and that takes us to Loftus Road, George, whereas we've already mentioned Sheff United did the business. Not an easy place to go and win. Great response from them to that defeat against Leeds, which would have hurt a lot all of last week. And it means it's 11 away wins in 18 league games this season. Them and Birmingham City, the only teams in the EFL to collect 2 points a game or more away from home. It is some personality that this Sheffield United team has.
Sure, and we've seen on a few occasions this season teams who come toe-to-toe with Leeds often throw in a bit of a poor performance off the back of it, which maybe isn't a massive surprise when you consider the physical toll that it probably takes out of you, not to mention the mental toll of being ahead late into a game and losing it 3-1. Look what happened to Sunderland after their defeat against Leeds a couple of weeks ago. But so for Sheffield United to come into what is a really difficult away game up against a QPR side who've been in really good form, who are so hard to break down, who have found their groove in terms of an attacking perspective and they were looking to put together a run to put them in the reckoning for the top six, and to beat them and to get past them, to manage the game in a way that enabled them to do so is really impressive. A brilliant cross from Harmer for the first goal, headed in by Brereton Diaz. One of the goals of the day from Tyrese Campbell, not necessarily a player that you expect just to rifle at home from 25 yards, but that's exactly what he did. QPR had a goal disallowed for offside just before that, and they kind of had their pressure told with a penalty given to them with about 20 minutes to go or so, which Frey tucked away. But Blade saw the game up with relative ease. As I say, it was a fairly tight game between the two sides. That was probably decided by one moment of sheer quality from Tyrese Campbell, and that is often what happens with these teams at the top end. And what has to happen for a team that's going to get promoted is in these tight games, you find a way to win with a moment like that. And that was the all-important one within this game. So, yeah, it was, from a kind of neutral's perspective, I still think there are some alarm bells in terms of Sheffield United's general performance level, but you cannot deny the way they are managing to kind of doesn't really seem to matter. They're finding ways to win these games. I probably think they have to improve if they're going to put themselves out of sight, especially with that trip to Turf Moor coming up. I think it's the third last game of the season. Like, from their perspective, they have to make sure that going into that game, given how good Burnley are, how strong Burnley are, defensively in particular, they have to go into that game knowing that if they lose that game, I reckon that they're not going to be usurped by Burnley. And to wins like this are mightily important.
Yeah, Brereton Diaz channeling his boyhood heroes, Marcelo Salas and Ivan Zamorano with his headed goal, and Tyrese Campbell with an absolute hammer, as you say. I mean, big contributions this season from Tyrese Campbell, and it's so pleasing to see because after leaving Stoke in the summer, I don't think it was entirely obvious what would happen next for Campbell, which championship teams would go in for him, and whether they would have a good plan for him. I think you have to say that Blades have. They have managed his minutes really well because he clearly still, even now, is struggling with the physical demands of the championship. And that's been an issue for him for the last couple of years in his career. I was surprised to see he's only played 1,000 minutes this season, only 11.2 90s, because it feels like he's been quite involved for Sheff United. He has had one hamstring injury, maybe when he just went a little bit over into the red zone, but they have kind of wrapped him in cotton wool. And in doing so, they've got the best out of him when he's on the pitch, because his 26% shot conversion rate this season, it's no surprise to me anyway. We've been covering Tyrese Campbell. We did a Sky segment on him when he was probably 19, 20. And I remember saying then, I consider him and Jared Bowen to be two of the best finishers in the league because of the accuracy and the speed with which they strike the ball. And he's always been a deadly finisher. So for him to have the 5th highest shot conversion in the league behind Callum Patterson, who's only had 15 shots, Osmajic, who's had 26, Ryan Coley, who's only had 14, and Greg Lee, who tops it with 5 goals from 15 shots. It just doesn't really surprise me, and I think he and Sheffield United deserve a lot of credit for how they've all kind of settled together and found a way for him to contribute and offer the things that he offers, his sort of strongest attributes, without having the stuff that sometimes causes him problems rearing its ugly injured head. Sheffield Wednesday 1, Sunderland 2 on Friday night. Much needed for Sunderland as well after their back-to-back defeats. Mayenda started in the place of Wilson Isidore, who's had a very high workload recently. And just like I thought Isidore would do when I picked him to score on the betting show, Mayenda caused no end of problems for Max Lowe in particular, who's not a centre-back, is currently having to play at centre-back in a back four for Sheffield Wednesday, and is causing problems. It did so against Coventry, and it did so here. Didn't deal with a pretty straightforward ball forward from Dennis Serkin. It was controlled by the arm of Mayenda and probably would have been disallowed had it been in the Premier League with VAR, but wasn't. Wednesday got themselves back in it and generally, again, performed quite well, I think. Patterson heading home after good work from Ingleson. But Mayenda won it, and it was one of the most delightful crosses of the season from Dan Neil from a deep right-sided position. Absolutely perfect trajectory onto the head of Mayenda, who, you know, he's had to be pretty patient with Isidore completely flourishing in front of him. But 6 goals, 5 assists in 1790s, mostly off the bench. It's great contributions from your backup striker. And when he's not even 20 years old yet, I think it's, you know, it should be really exciting for Sunderland fans because he's clearly come on from how raw he was last season. I think this is a great role for him. Luca 9 made his 300th appearance for Sunderland. I wrote about him, Ashley Barnes, who did the same for Burnley this weekend, and the 20 other EFL players who have played over 300 games for their current clubs. I wrote about that at some length on Weekend Notes, and it was really enjoyable to put some thoughts down about why I love when a player and a club just stay together for 6, 7, 8 years, and what I think it means about the player in particular, and how impressive it is, and I think how important it can be for fans as well. But I thought it was nice to mention Luke 09 because, George, I kind of forgot this. He signed for them August 2018. He was not a centre-back. He was a central midfield ball winner, box crasher. And his first game for Sunderland was opening day in League One. He got hooked at half-time. They were 1-0 down. They went on to win the game 2-1. He started in midfield with Barley Mumba.
Against Chelsea.
Correct. Oh, that's good. God, that's good from you.
Lyle Taylor scored a penalty to put the 1-0 up.
In front of him, he had Honeyman, Gooch and Chris Maguire with Josh Madger up front. Behind him, he had Adam Matthews and Donald Love, the fullbacks, with Ozturk and Louvens, the centre-backs, and McLaughlin in goal. It's cool to see that and realise how far both Luke 09 and Sunderland have come since that time.
Famously, that team had very few touches in the box. Yeah, I mean, he's a remarkable player, really, when you consider where he started. You know, he was shuffled back into right back and then for a time as like a makeshift centre-back until suddenly he wasn't, and he was just a centre-back. Someone who scores goals at the other end too from set pieces, whose absolute commitment to the cause is always obvious, who made a bit of a name for himself during the Sunderland Till I Die documentary as kind of being the kind of boy that every parent wants their daughter to bring home. Smiley, happy, polite. It's amazing to see. He's become basically the poster boy of this new era of Sunderland, and it's interesting, coming in as like the fresh-faced, happy chappy to now being kind of a grisly centre back who is one of the senior members of the team. So yeah, absolutely. And for Sunderland, this is a pretty significant result. I was watching this live, and in the second half, after Wednesday went ahead, it really felt like they were the team in the ascendancy, and that if there was any team likely to go on and win this game, it would have been them. Issues for Wednesday as well. They've lost 4 of their last 5 games. The aforementioned Maxwell, as poorly as he's been playing, well, as unsuited as he is to being centre-back. He came off injured just before half-time, and Liam Palmer came on for him, so they're now really short of any kind of centre-backs. Hickway is still the only fit one, but obviously the reason Lowe was playing on that left side was because he's left-footed, whereas now they don't have anyone to provide that balance. Any aspirations of a playoff push seem to be over for Wednesday, but Sunderland certainly keeping themselves just about in touch with that top 3.
And Wednesday have 2 players in the 300 club, Liam Palmer, who's more like 450, and Barry Bannon as well. They're the only team in the Championship with 2 such players, which I thought was interesting. Only Harrogate in the EFL have more such players. Feels like a few times recently where they're just not getting the rub of the green or the points that their performances maybe deserve. And I think ultimately now with Wednesday, and I don't want to be doom and gloom, George, but for me, given they're now very unlikely to make the playoffs, when it felt a month or so ago that they had a chance, my attention now turns to what happens this summer and next season. Particularly, will there be any interest in Danny Röhl from within the English pyramid, higher up the pyramid, or perhaps from his native Germany? How much appetite does he have to stay, given that his owner is not always the easiest to work with, given that the squad, in order to be turned around fully, has a lot of work that needs to be done, and not a huge amount of options to raise funds through player sales. And I don't always get the feeling that he's thrilled with how recruitment happens at Sheffield Wednesday anyway. So I'm a little bit nervous. It's really early to be saying this, but I just thought I would because I like sharing my feelings. I'm a little bit nervous for Wednesday. They've also, their record against the top 10 this season, 2 wins, 3 draws, 11 defeats, 9 points from 16 games. Against 11th and below, 10 wins, 6 draws and 3 defeats for 36 points from 19. So very clear basically where they sit in the pecking order. And I think it's still quite impressive, to be honest, given I don't think they've got a very good squad, as I've said many times. George, who's in 5th place now? And how did they get there?
Coventry City are in 5th place. They got there because they beat Oxford 3-2 in a ridiculous game at 12:30 on Saturday. Coventry by far and away the better team in the first half. It was a first half that kind of went the same way as Oxford's game at West Brom the Saturday before, with Coventry just kind of dominating in every single facet of the game, and Oxford kind of unable to mount any kind of attacking threat or attacking challenge. But that changed in the second half. Just say Jack Rodoni scored the first goal after an unbelievably good ball from Sakamoto. Sakamoto probably the best player on the pitch on the day, as we'll get to in a second. But
he's scoring a header. Where have we seen that before? Every game.
Yeah.
Every game.
But the second half started a bit differently with Shemi Plaheta, who's been very out of form, scampering down the right-hand side, doing what he normally does by cutting onto his left foot. Everyone in the whole world thought he was going to shoot. He actually played quite a nice little pass to Ola Romani, who scored his first goal since making the move from the Eredivisie in the January window. He looks really good. I was really not enamoured by what I saw watching clips of him on Y-Scout when he signed. I think the reason for that was because he was playing out on the right-hand side. In an interview he gave when he first arrived at the club.
Maybe you're just a bad video scout.
Yeah, I know. Well,
no, can't be that. Can't be that.
In his first interview, he was like, I've been playing out on the right in Holland and I don't like it there. He said, I want to play on the triangle on the left, which he described as being the number 9, the 10 and the left wing. That triangle is where he wants to play.
Nice. I like that. I can see me taking that on. Always open to new phrasing.
He looks really good. The shape didn't change, but it was Romney and Harris kind of playing almost as a kind of alternating front two. Sometimes Harris dropping in and being a 10 and Romney running on. Sometimes Romney being the one in possession who'd drop in and Harris running the line. And it worked really well. I think Harris deserves some credit for getting out of the way of the Ollie Romney's shot, because if that had hit him and stayed out, I think the world really would have just opened up and swallowed him whole. And then kind of chaos ensued after that with the comedy goal of the weekend, Efren Mason-Clark judging a weird kind of lob back pass from Cameron Brannigan better than Jamie Cumming. It's one of those where, and it's another headed goal as well, even though it's not the standard headed goal for Coventry. But it's one, it looks really bad on first viewing. The more I think about it, the more I think it's a bit of a nightmare pass for Cumming to deal with, where I think if he rushes out and tries to meet the ball on the bounce, there's every chance he gets it all wrong and it just bounces away from him. Instead, he seemingly backs himself, just out-jump the onrushing Mason-Clark. What he doesn't know is that Mason-Clark's spring is immense, and he times the jump way better than Cumming. He gets there first and nods it over his head. But there was, that lead didn't last long with Elliot Moore nodding home straight from a corner. Quite a clever little foul from Harris on Dovin, I thought, which wasn't seen to aid that one in. And then a very soft penalty where Peter Kioso effectively, I don't know what you thought of this. Like, a lot of Oxford fans are understandably livid. It's one of those classic cases where everyone's like, if that gets given, they're like 50 a game, which isn't really true. But there's obviously a lot of jostling and holding and tugging and other things at corners that aren't normally given. But in this case, Kioso just kind of grabs, I think it's Thomas's shirt, and just like holds it as he runs away. And the referee, and it's like right on the edge of the box.
Then jumps on his back, wants a piggyback.
And then the referee is like right there. I'm like, if you're going to do little tactical fouls at set pieces, don't do it on the edge of the box. Don't grab his shirt so you can see that, like, the pulling of the shirt. It's soft, but I think it's probably just about fair, sadly.
Yes, I agree.
But the penalty was saved. But then Sakamoto had the last save with an unbelievably well-taken goal, where kind of cross came deflected out to him on the right-hand side, and he one touch and hit it with his left foot before the ball bounced into the far corner. There was a frustrating moment at the end of the game where the ball kind of seemed to divert into Matt Phillips's path from a corner, and he ducked, which was an interesting decision to make at that point. He's not having a very good time as an Oxford player at the moment. So Coventry get 3 points they probably deserves in a pretty topsy-turvy game. Massive for them. Frustration for Oxford. The only positive thing to take out of it from Oxford's point of view in my mind is that our home performances remain pretty good. Like the results aren't great, but we had plenty of opportunities against Pompey. We shouldn't have lost that game the way that we did. Here we caused a Coventry side with an amazing form, some real problems. The problem that Oxford have is we only have 5 more home games, and 3 of those are Sunderland, Sheffield United and Leeds, which is tough. So still probably relying on teams beneath us not to improve. For Coventry, an awkward second half at times, and probably manoeuvred fairly easily by the end to maintain their very good form.
I like how there's a period where you thought if Lampard gets a few wins early on, Coventry could make a late push for the playoffs. I mean, it's 34 games in and they're 5th. They're already there.
Yeah.
Have they gone too early? We will find out.
Push for the automatics?
I did check the table, but no. They've won 8 of their last 9. Club account on Instagram saying that's the first time that's happened in 55 years. It's as many wins as they'd got from their previous 34 championship fixtures stretching back to April last year. It's pretty amazing. And George, a Luton side, they got their first win after 12 without, and it's a big one, a 1-0 home win to Pompey.
It's exactly what they needed. They needed just somehow to get a win over the line, and that's what they did. The all-important goal coming from Alfie Doughty, following up a rebound off a near own goal that hit the post, rebounded into his path. After Luton had made a decent start to the game, it was then really bitty. Not many chances at either end. Not much by the way of kind of free-flowing football as Luton tried to manage the game and successfully did, albeit Conor Ogilvie with a huge chance. A chance that there aren't many defenders probably where you probably pick him to be the one you want to get on this chance. A free header, 6-7 yards out, meets it perfectly and somehow conspires to head it over the bar. And that could be a massive moment in this championship relegation scrap, where that is the 3 points that really brings Luton back into the mix, takes them off bottom. Their first win in a while under Bloomfield, a clean sheet as well. It keeps Portsmouth honest. They're a team who look, they're probably out of it, but if they aren't careful, in a similar position to, let's say, Oxford a couple of weeks ago, where they're just a couple more defeats away from being sucked back into the mess. So that was kind of the turning point within the game. It wasn't a brilliant performance from Luton by any stretch, where I'm not sitting here saying that was the kind of performance we've been waiting to see under Bloomfield. They were much better. They were better defensively. There's no denying that. They weren't necessarily a consistent attacking threat, but at this stage of the season, it's the result that really matters, and it's an incredibly important 3 points for them to get to show that they can do it.
Yeah, Jordan Clark had missed the last few games through injury. I think he's really important for the last portion of the season. He does a bit of everything in central midfield. He's turned himself into a ball winner. He's always been a pretty effective attacking player in terms of ball carrying and a smart passer, a bit of a goal threat as we saw here as well. And I'm pleased to see that Bloomfield is sticking with the 3-5-2. Even though it didn't bring immediate results, I felt that it was important just to stick with something for a few games, and you get the kind of compound benefits in matches 4, 5, 6, a bit like Mark Hughes is doing at Carlisle. And I think Clark, for this system, with Asgard, also there with the 2 strikers and the wing backs, is a really good profile. And then you can just have a Nakamba just sitting in front of the back line as well, and kind of mopping up there. So yeah, I'm feeling some feelings of positivity for the first time in a while, but I'm trying to remind myself, as you are, that if that Ogilvie header goes in, there's we'd all be bemoaning Luton can't see it out, not good enough defending their own box, and it was only through luck for them that it didn't really. So there we go. Up back towards the Championship, there was two big late goals really. One was scored by Norwich, which would have put them 1 point behind Blackburn, who they were leading at Ewood Park. It would have put them 2 points off the playoffs as well. And then 10-man Blackburn equalised right at the end. So there was a weird incident in the first half where Dom Hyam sort of jabbed Angus Gunn in the jaw as Gunn
really
had just caught a corner. I don't really understand why he did that, what he was thinking, how much he meant to do it. It looked terrible. The ref didn't see it, and he wasn't sent off, which was, it was unfortunate for Norwich. It was a weird moment. He should have gone. Emmanuel Dennis did get sent off eventually for 2 bookable challenges on Chris Sean, and Norwich made it count eventually. Worked it nicely down the left, a cutback, really nice finish from Ante Cernats into the corner, and then just naive or flimsy or soft or just unserious. Sainz giving it away when he could have just taken it to the corner. He was trying to meg someone, gave the ball away. Blackburn attacked with 10, cross floated in, poor marking, poor defensive line. Weimann sneaks in a header for 1-1. I think that's the story for me is Norwich tripping themselves up time and time again. The stats are really, really bad. Oh, here's a good one. Only 3 teams in the league have taken the lead more than Norwich in Championship games this season. That's normally the sign of a good team. But no team in the league has given up a larger percentage of their leads, more than half. In Norwich's case, more than half the time they take the lead, they give it straight back. They've conceded 4 more equalisers than anyone else in the division. And when you consider that Burnley have only conceded 1 equaliser in the whole season, it just shows the difference between teams' mentality and ability to defend leads when they go ahead. Just quite unimpressive, but a big goal for Blackburn. That even so, Val Ishmael has got a job to do just staving off some of the players putting pressure on their playoff spot. George, what did you make of Blackburn turning to Val Ishmael? Now his 4th Championship job after Barnsley, West Brom and Watford. With each Val Ishmael Championship job, I get less and less sure about what I think about Val Ishmael.
Yeah, it's a funny one because obviously the Barnsley job is near enough a 10 out of 10. Like you cannot question his impact in terms of what was just an unbelievable period at the club where he took Barnsley from being Championship strugglers, albeit upwardly mobile with the previous, off the back of the great job that Stendhal and Struber had done. And then he went to West Brom, and I think West Brom is one of those where in our head we all remember he didn't do very well at West Brom. But actually, if you look back at what West Brom were when he took over, like a recently relegated Premier League side, and you look at where they were when he was sacked, which was, I think, in 3rd or 4th, he didn't do a bad job there. It was a bad fit culturally. Their fans absolutely hated the football. I think probably, if you've just been relegated from the Premier League, you probably shouldn't then be hiring a guy who likes to play really direct long ball football because you have... I was going to say delusions of grandeur, but maybe it's just you have grandeur. You have visions of what you should be, and that doesn't really tally with it. Especially when you get relegated from the Premier League, you have one of the most talented squads in the league basically by default, and that's not really the best way to utilise it. So I personally wouldn't hold.
Did that impact him a little bit when it comes to style? Because I remember when he was hired by Watford and we were talking about the style, which we felt pretty confident in discussing. And then it didn't really look like
very weird.
Any which way style-wise.
It was to start the season, they were aggressively possession heavy. And it was completely the opposite of what we thought it was going to be. Like I remember they were like their passing stats around the defensive areas were like through the roof. They were averaging like 550, 600 passes per game, which is like completely the opposite of Val Ball that we saw at Barnsley, and then to a lesser extent, but still at West Brom, which was all about basically squeezing high and turning the defence and just basically dominating space. Whether that was him trying to show that he was capable of kind of mixing the style, I don't know. But the underlying numbers at that time were actually really strong. And there was a period in like September, October, where I remember thinking like they're probably the ones at the moment aren't getting the results they deserve and they should improve. But as the season went on, they kind of reverted to type, but never to that like really strong direct identity. It became nothing ball, there wasn't really an identity. There wasn't really a style of play. They got rid of the heavy possession stuff, but they weren't necessarily direct. They weren't necessarily high pressing. It kind of felt like they were just a team with players who were set up in a formation and look to utilise their talents in a pretty nondescript way, which didn't do very well, and they finished in the bottom half of the table. That job I find really perplexing and weird. Like if I was Rudy Gestede, which I've often dreamt about being, surely you're saying to Valérien Ismaël, do the stuff that made you successful. Do the stuff. Be the manager that took Barnsley to the brink of the Premier League and got you a pretty good job at the time in the Championship. Whatever happened at Watford, I don't understand what it was. I mean, it's one of the many perplexing things that happens at that club. But I think he should, whether it was by design or because he was told that's the way they had to play or whatever, it was a bizarre time. But I definitely wouldn't be writing off Ismaël as a very, very effective manager and coach when playing a certain way. And I think especially, probably even more so now than when Barnsley were employing that style of football. I think there's, if you are the one or two teams in the league that play aggressive, high press, and direct, attritional football, should suit you quite well, because there are so many teams in the league who won't like to play against that, who like to get the ball down and play because of their perception of how the game should be played. And if I was a Blackburn fan, I know some Blackburn fans won't want to see their team play that way, but I think that's probably the best route to success under this boss. And should they manage to get up into the Premier League, I think it would be perfectly suited for a newly promoted team in the top tier.
Should be perfectly suited for striker Maktar Gay, who has an unbelievable leap on him and could be that sort of, remember Daryl DK thriving under Ismaël at Barnsley, as his aerial ability was so impressive. Let's go Middlesbrough derby. Big week for Borough since we last spoke. It was all doom and gloom. A win-win since then against Stoke, and here 1-0 against Derby. We spoke about issues with the front four, or issues as I perceived them anyway. The front four being Whittaker, Bergsorg on the flanks, Iheanacho and Conway through the middle. Can I introduce you to this week's front four for Borough? Whittaker, Force, Azaz and Conway, all pretty fluid in terms of their position. Whittaker and Force broadly handling the right side of the right half of the pitch. Azaz and Conway broadly the left half of the pitch. And it's working very nicely. They've all been combining beautifully, scoring 4 goals, Borough have it, in the last 2 games. It took a while to come against Derby. They were huffing and puffing a little bit. The ball given away by Caden Jackson at Borough. If you're Derby, don't pass the ball to the opposition in your defensive third. It's not helpful, and it was led to eventually a really good strike from Finn Azaz. A goal and assist in midweek for the returning Azaz after I publicly called for his return to the team, and a winning goal here. He's the seamster of Borough. He knits it all together, and he's also the first player in the EFL this season to hit a double-double. 10 goals, 10 assists. Second season in a row that Azaz has done that. I think you can get a little bit bogged down in individual match-to-match performances, and I think people might have been getting a bit bogged down with Finn Azaz in recent weeks, maybe missed the bigger picture, which is that he does this about as well as anyone towards the top of the Championship, and he is a double-doubler, which is pretty damn impressive. Derby, not so. They've only scored in 2 of their 10 games since New Year's Day. Lots of work to do. As for Borough, how much has the pendulum swung the other way? Is this legit? They're only 2 points off the playoffs now. The season's not over, as people seem to think. And I wonder if we'll look back at the sort of hysteria of February with a wry smile later on in the campaign. I think it's still too early to say definitively. I'm not willing to throw my full weight behind another Borough playoff spot, a playoff charge. They've beaten 2 teams in Stoke and Borough in the last week. They've got Swansea, then QPR, then Luton, then Oxford United in their next 4. So a good chance to pick up some points if they are indeed back to Borough's normal levels. Stoke 0, Watford 0 was a match that happened. Wilmot headed onto his own bar. Watford almost going ahead through an own goal there. Watford had a chance in the second half that was brilliantly saved by Selvik, who's been a really good addition in nets for Watford. He was signed by Udinese at the start of January, and Watford somehow plucked him from there on loan. And now he's performing very well in nets for them. 3 straight clean sheets for them for the first time since December 2022. In the FA Cup, we have a Championship team in the quarter-final. That's not the headline. there was a match between two Championship teams, so that was always going to be the case. The fact that it's Burnley is notable, George, not least because, the fact that it's Preston who have made the quarterfinals is pretty notable in that they beat their local rivals, Burnley. They beat them by 3-0. 3 goals conceded by Burnley, who made a fair amount of changes in their back line. Hladky and Worrell were in, for example. But it was a brilliant free kick from Robbie Brady. Osmajic scored the second. Keane scored the third. And PNE are in the Cup quarterfinals. 2-time winners, PNE, lest we forget, are in the quarterfinals for the first time in 59 years. And I think that's a bit of fun.
Hladky stays in goal for the rest of the season for Burnley. Does that mean that JJ Watt comes out of retirement? Because it feels a bit cheeky, this. Because there's this whole thing going on about James Trafford making a bet with the Burnley minority owner. And he said he couldn't concede another goal for the rest of the season. But they're at the FA Cup now because Traff wasn't playing. Shambles. Yeah, I'm joking. I don't think James Trafford would have got anywhere near Robbie Brady's free kick, is what I would say. Because it was so good. There is the reverse angle from that free kick. You see it live and you're like, kind of feels like it didn't really go that far in the corner, and it's a bit of a weird one. And then you see where he starts the ball from the reverse angle, where Brady starts the ball left of the wall, and like really high, and it still manages to kind of dip and swerve into the top right hand corner. It is an unbelievable free kick. So, I'm never a huge fan of direct set piece goals because it's basically just kicking the ball in the back of the net, but that one was different to most of them against his former club. And but Preston were good. Kolyashko missed a decent chance of 1-0, but they were good value for their win. And Osmajic is probably the player that, if you are playing against your rivals, he's probably the one person you don't want to score against you, because he loved it and celebrated in front of the Burnley fans. So, and it was just for Hecky and Preston that he's done such a good job there since he came in. What an amazing way to beat your rivals and get into the last day of the FA Cup.
Yeah, a home tie as well. That's the good news. The bad news is it's against Aston Villa, who are pretty good. The good news being they've got quite a lot to think about in terms of the Champions League, in terms of the Premier League as well. And Preston have only lost 1 home league game under Paul Heckingbottom. 16 they've played. And it was the game against Bristol City where Hirakawa handled it on his way to scoring the first goal. It was a blatant handball not given. And so they sort of gave the opposition, or the refs gave the opposition, a goal head start. So it should be difficult for Villa, and that would be great because we've had semi-finalists from the Championship the last 2 seasons, I believe. I'm getting a taste for it. So come on, Preston, take us to Wembley. City played Argyle, Man City, I should say. Of all pods where you can't call them City, it's an EFL pod.
Who would be the City, would you say, if you were to refer to a city in the EFL?
That's such a good question. I'm going to offend about 15 fan bases. Genuinely, first thing that sprang to mind was Bradford City.
Interesting. Bristol for me.
No idea why.
City.
Really? Bristol City. City. Anyway.
That's going to offend people.
Argyle went down 3-1, but boy, did they have a moment. And I think it's pretty funny that we've got a season in which there's a team who've taken less than a point per game in their league matches. They've conceded 2 goals per game in the league, and yet they've got Brentford away. They've got Liverpool at home. They've got taking the lead at the Etihad through Big Maxi. And all of those late goals that they've scored at Home Park as well, 11 in the last 10 minutes of home league games, which only Leeds have scored more than. Football, eh?
Yeah, crazy. I mean, again, it feels like they've had 2 shots in their last couple of away games against Luton and City, and scored them both, and both of them were Maxi. Yeah, I mean, for those fans that made the trip to City and got to witness that moment, incredibly special. They gave a great account of themselves. They didn't offer a great deal going forward, but you wouldn't really. And they took their one chance when it came. Massive credit to them. And, as Muzdalic said off the back of it, he was like, this performance, this result will give us great belief and momentum going into the rest of the season. And, it's hard to see why it wouldn't, albeit how much they've taken out of them physically ahead of a trip to Hull on Tuesday night.
Well, we're going to find out. Millwall didn't win the Battle of South London at Palace. The match was more or less over after 8 minutes, really. Liam Roberts, the goalkeeper, sprinting out to clear the bouncing ball, doing so and then kicking Mateta in the head on his follow-through for a red card. Dangerous play. Palace winning by 3-1. That'll do for the Championship segment.